Hello guys, welcome back to my channel where we bring you interesting and fascinating Nollywood movie stories. If you're new here, kindly subscribe to this channel to get more of our latest Nollywood movie stories. Stephanie, a young and beautiful lady, lived alone in her well-furnished apartment. She was financially stable and independent, enjoying a life she had built for herself through hard work. One morning, as she prepared for her day, the unexpected sound of the doorbell startled her. Curious, she opened the door and was surprised to see her mother, Mrs. Florence, standing there with a warm smile on her face. "Mom, what a surprise!" Stephanie exclaimed, embracing her mother. Mrs. Florence returned the hug, saying, "Good morning, my dear." Once inside and seated in the living room, Stephanie looked at her mother curiously and asked, "Mom, it's so early. Is everything okay?" Mrs. Florence smiled knowingly and replied, "Of course, everything is fine. I came for the preparation of the marriage." "Marriage?" Stephanie repeated, her face a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Whose marriage are we talking about, Mom?" Mrs. Florence took a deep breath and said, "Stephanie, it's about you. Don't you think it's time you settled down? Look around. All your mates are married, and here you are, still single." This struck a nerve with Stephanie, who frowned and replied sharply, "Mom, we are not the same. Besides, all men are the same. They're not trustworthy. I don't see the point in rushing into marriage just because everyone else is doing it." Her mother sighed, clearly disappointed. "Stephanie, not all men are bad. If you really want to find the right one, you need to put yourself out there and be open to possibilities." Stephanie rolled her eyes and said sarcastically, "Sure, Mom. Maybe I should wear a sign on my forehead saying, 'Looking for a good man.' Can we please change the topic?" Mrs. Florence, though visibly upset, let it go and instead teased her daughter lightly before asking for something to drink. Stephanie, relieved, got up and headed to the kitchen. The following day, Stephanie's best friend, Bella, came over. The two of them sat in the living room, chatting and catching up. "Stephanie," Bella said excitedly, "let's go out and have some fun. You never know, you might meet someone interesting." Stephanie shook her head and replied firmly, "I'm not interested, Bella. I'm busy with work, and honestly, I don't have the energy to deal with heartbreak again." Bella gave her a knowing look and said, "Stephanie, you can't keep punishing yourself for what one guy did to you. You need to go out, have fun, and let go of the past." "Bella, please stop. Can we talk about something else?" Bella sighed but gave in. The two friends laughed and teased each other, eventually moving on to lighter topics. The next morning, Stephanie was driving to work when her car broke down on a busy road. Frustrated, she stepped out to check the engine, but she couldn't figure out what was wrong. She tried calling her mechanic, but the call wouldn't go through. As she stood there, stranded and anxious, a sleek car drove past but then reversed. A handsome man stepped out and approached her. "Hello," he greeted warmly. "Hi," Stephanie replied, relieved to see someone willing to help. "Is everything okay?" the man asked. "My car broke down and I can't reach my mechanic," she explained. The man smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll call my mechanic for you." He took out his phone and made the call. Within minutes, the mechanic arrived and fixed her car. Stephanie thanked the man profusely. "Thank you so much. I don't even know how to repay you." "It's nothing," he said with a charming smile. "By the way, my name is Gerald. Can I have your contact? Just to check if you got to work safely." Reluctantly, Stephanie gave him her number before driving off. Later that evening, Stephanie returned home exhausted. Bella was there and they sat in the living room together. "How was work?" Bella asked. "Stressful," Stephanie replied. "You won't believe what happened today. My car broke down and this guy stopped to help me." Bella's eyes lit up. "Was he cute? Did you get his number?" Stephanie frowned. "Bella, I'm telling you about my day and you're asking if he's cute?" She shook her head, dismissing the topic. That night, as Stephanie lay in bed, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She hesitated but picked up. "Hello?" "Hi, Stephanie. It's Gerald." It took her a moment to place the name, but when she did, she thanked him again for his help. They chatted briefly before she ended the call, bidding him good night. The next morning, Gerald called again, and they spoke for a while. He asked if she would be free on Saturday for a hangout. Stephanie hesitated, but eventually agreed. On Saturday, Gerald and Stephanie met for their outing. They spent the day laughing, talking, and enjoying each other's company. For the first time in years, Stephanie let her guard down and had fun with someone new. When she returned home that evening, she couldn't stop smiling. Bella noticed and asked, "What's with the grin?" Stephanie tried to brush it off, but Bella persisted. Finally, she confessed, "Bella, I had the best day. Gerald is such a nice and caring guy." Bella hugged her and said, "I'm so happy for you, Stephanie. It's about time you let someone in." As the two friends laughed and celebrated, Stephanie realized that maybe, just maybe, her mother and Bella had been right all along. She needed to open her heart to new possibilities. Stephanie, a young and independent woman, had always lived a reserved life, keeping her distance from relationships due to her past experiences. One evening, after a long day at work, she decided to stop by a shopping mall to pick up a few items. As she stood at the counter ready to pay, she encountered an issue with her card as the network was down. Frustrated, she tried to sort it out, but the cashier could not process her payment. Meanwhile, a man named Kelvin, who had been observing her from a distance, approached her. Without saying much, he handed his card to the cashier to pay for her items. Stephanie was taken aback by his gesture and turned to thank him. "Thank you, but I'll pay you back," she said sincerely. Kelvin smiled and replied, "There's no need to pay me back. What I really want is to take you on a date." Stephanie raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Are you serious? Just because you paid for my groceries doesn't mean I owe you a date." Kelvin chuckled and said, "Even if I didn't pay, I'd still ask you out." Stephanie insisted on repaying him and asked for his account details, but Kelvin pretended he couldn't remember them. Instead, he suggested, "How about you give me your number? I'll call you later and send the details." Though hesitant, Stephanie eventually gave him her number and walked away. Later that night, while in her room, Stephanie received a call from an unfamiliar number. Picking up the phone, she heard Kelvin's voice. "Oh, you're calling about your money, right?" she asked. Kelvin laughed. "Do you really think that's why I'm calling? I just wanted to hear your sweet voice and remind you how beautiful you are. So what do you think about a date?" Stephanie sighed. "You're still on this? I'll think about it," she replied. Kelvin pleaded with her, and after much hesitation, she finally agreed. They chatted for a while before ending the call. The following evening, Stephanie met Kelvin for their date. They spent time playing games and laughing together, and Stephanie found herself enjoying his company. For the first time in a long while, she felt genuinely happy. Later that day, Stephanie was in the living room with her best friend Bella, chatting and relaxing. Her phone rang, and it was Gerald, the man who had helped her when her car broke down. As they spoke, Stephanie smiled uncontrollably, clearly enjoying their conversation. After the call, Bella teased her. "Stephanie, what's going on? You're glowing!" Stephanie hesitated, but eventually admitted, "I've met two amazing guys recently, and they're both so nice to me." Bella, shocked, replied, "Wait a minute. Weren't you the one who said all men are the same? Now you're stuck between two good guys and can't even decide." Stephanie nodded, confessing that she was confused. Bella advised her to be careful and think things through. The following evening, Gerald called Stephanie and told her to get ready because he was coming to pick her up. Excited, she quickly went upstairs to change. Gerald arrived and they spent the evening together, laughing and having a good time. The next day, Kelvin showed up at Stephanie's house with a gift. Bella answered the door and called Stephanie, who hurried downstairs. Thrilled by the thoughtful gesture, Stephanie thanked Kelvin. As he was leaving, she walked him to the door and bid him goodbye. Later that evening, Bella confronted Stephanie. "You can't keep leading both of them on, Stephanie. You need to make a choice." Stephanie sighed. "I know, but they're both so good to me. I don't even know who to choose." Bella shook her head. "I thought you said there were no good men out there? Now you're overwhelmed by two great guys!" Stephanie promised to think about it. 2 days later, Kelvin called to ask her out for another hangout. However, Gerald had already asked her first. Stephanie told Kelvin she wasn't available, and though he sounded disappointed, he understood. When Stephanie returned home from work the next day, she told Bella her decision. "I've thought about it, and I've decided to keep both of them," she said confidently. Bella gasped. "What? Are you serious? You can't date two guys at the same time, Stephanie.
Stephanie!
He dismissed her friend's concerns, insisting that she couldn't let go of either of them. Bella tried to explain why it was a bad idea, but Stephanie changed the subject and went upstairs. A month later, both Gerald and Kelvin, unaware of each other, decided to visit Stephanie on the same day. Gerald arrived first, and Stephanie welcomed him warmly. They were chatting when there was a knock at the door. Stephanie opened it and was shocked to see Kelvin standing there with a smile. Gerald noticed her startled reaction and came to the door. Seeing Kelvin, he asked Stephanie, "Who is this?" Stephanie, caught off guard, stammered, unable to provide an answer. Realizing what was happening, both men grew upset and left. Stephanie tried to stop them, but it was too late. Heartbroken, she sat on the floor, crying uncontrollably. Bella came home to find her in tears. "What happened?" she asked, rushing to her side. "They're gone," Stephanie sobbed. "Who's gone?" "Gerald and Kelvin," she replied, explaining everything. Bella sighed. "I warned you, Stephanie, but you didn't listen. You need to calm down and think about what you really want." That night, Bella brought dinner to Stephanie's room and managed to get her to eat. As they talked, Bella encouraged her to follow her heart. "You can't keep both of them. Stephanie, you need to choose one." "But I don't know who to choose. They're both so nice and I don't want to hurt anyone," Stephanie said, still torn. Bella reassured her, "You're not hurting anyone by being honest. Just think about what you truly want, and I'll help you talk to them. But first, I need their contacts." Stephanie hugged her friend tightly, grateful for her support. Bella went downstairs, leaving Stephanie alone to ponder her next move. The next morning, Bella sat in her room thinking about how to resolve the situation between Stephanie, Gerald, and Kelvin. She decided to take action and called both men, requesting to meet them at the same location to discuss something important. A short while later, Bella met with Gerald and Kelvin. She began by explaining the situation, saying, "Stephanie is not the person you think she is. Her past experiences made her distrustful of men, and when she met both of you, she found it hard to choose because you're both so kind to her. She got confused and didn't want to hurt anyone." Both men listened carefully, their expressions softening as they began to understand Stephanie's dilemma. Bella then pleaded with them, "Please give her a chance to make her choice. She needs time to follow her heart." Gerald and Kelvin exchanged glances but didn't say much at first. Bella suggested they come to Stephanie's house the next evening, allowing her to decide. They both agreed to think about it, and Bella left them to make their decision. As Gerald and Kelvin stood there discussing, Kelvin said, "You know, instead of fighting over this, we should just let her decide. Whoever she chooses, the other person should accept it without any resentment." Gerald nodded. "That makes sense. There's no need for bad blood between us." The two men agreed to Bella's suggestion and went their separate ways. The next evening, both Gerald and Kelvin arrived at Stephanie's house, waiting patiently for her return. When Stephanie walked in, she was stunned to see both of them there. Unable to speak, she simply looked at her friend Bella, who asked her to sit down. Bella began to explain. "Stephanie, both Gerald and Kelvin are here because it's time for you to make a choice. To make it easier and fair for everyone, I've written their names on 2 pieces of paper. You'll draw one name from this bowl, and whoever's name you pick will be the one you choose. But remember, follow your heart." Stephanie looked at the bowl, nervous and hesitant. She thought about what Bella had said earlier about being honest with herself and making a choice. With a deep breath, she reached into the bowl and pulled out a piece of paper. For a moment, she just stared at it, unable to speak. Bella took the paper from her hand and read it aloud. "Kelvin." Kelvin's face lit up with excitement as Stephanie finally broke the silence. "Wow, I can't believe this," she said with a smile, her voice filled with emotion. Kelvin stood up and they embraced warmly, both of them clearly overjoyed. Gerald, though visibly disappointed, managed to smile and congratulated them. The atmosphere turned celebratory, with everyone chatting and laughing. Even Gerald joined in, showing no hard feelings. Bella, watching the scene, felt relieved and happy that the situation had been resolved peacefully. That night, Stephanie realized how lucky she was to have such understanding people in her life. she vowed to cherish the relationship she had chosen and move forward with an open heart. So guys, I believe you enjoyed this movie story and learned a lot from it. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to get more of our latest Nollywood movie stories.